United States climate envoy John Kerry says China and the US must lead the way on climate change. The two countries have released a joint statement at the UN Climate Summit in Glasgow. China and the US are the world's biggest emitters of carbon dioxide. The declaration includes statements about closing the emissions gap, limiting methane and doing more to halt deforestation. Mr. Kerry says while the US and China have their differences, working together on the environment is imperative.
The expression that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Well, every step matters right now, and we have a long journey ahead of us. So we have to mitigate faster. We have to cut methane emissions faster. We have to continue to raise ambition. And most of all, we have to take action in order to keep 1.5 degrees centigrade alive. The United States and China have no shortage of differences, but on climate, cooperation is the only way to get this job done.
China's chief climate negotiator says cooperation is the only choice for the two superpowers.
Climate is a common challenge faced by humanity and will impact the well-being of future generations. It's becoming increasingly urgent and severe, turning a future challenge into a crisis happening now. In the area of climate change, there is more agreement between China and the US than divergence, making it an area with huge potential for cooperation. With 2 days remaining until the end of the Glasgow summit, we hope this joint declaration will be China and the US's contribution to the success of COP26.
Australia could be pressured to strengthen its climate targets by 2030 under a draft agreement released at the Glasgow Climate Summit. Negotiations are in their final stages, with some leaders, including the UK Prime Minister, warning that time is running out. Europe correspondent Nick Dole has more from London.
One of the most significant parts of this draft agreement is a paragraph that calls for nations to accelerate the phasing out of coal and also the phasing out of subsidies for fossil fuels. It's really the first time that a COP statement like this has had language of this sort, so it is significant in that way, although Australia, as we know, has already refused to sign at this summit a pledge to phase out coal. It says that it doesn't want to wipe out industries, as it puts it. Another key plank of this draft agreement is a paragraph calling for countries to revisit and essentially up their commitments for 2030 emissions reductions. Now, Australia, as we know, has already pledged to go net zero by 2050, but it hasn't updated its 2030 commitment since 2015. Now, the federal government does say that forecasts suggest that we can cut emissions by about 35% by 2030, but that isn't a formal pledge, and scientists have reaffirmed this information that really the world needs to cut emissions by 45% if it's to have any hope of keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees. The host nation, the UK, says still a lot more work needs to be done over the next 48 hours or so. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, he's gone back to Glasgow to try to move things along. And he says 1.5, well, it might be a difficult goal, but it's something that all leaders need to work towards as this conference reaches its pinnacle.
And so my question to my fellow world leaders this afternoon, as we enter the last hours of COP, is will you help us do that? Will you help us grasp that opportunity, or will you stand in the way?